Encounter with a strange creature. That night, I had a horrifying experience that I still can't forget. The images haunt my mind, and the anxiety of what could happen next keeps me on edge. I can't quite describe this feeling. All I know is that the fear hasn't let me go. My dogs, my family, everyone is at risk. So, I've decided to share this story and seek help from you. Around 9 p.m., my mother called me downstairs. She asked me to help clean up some boxes in the kitchen to clear the space. Our house is small, with only 2 bedrooms for 5 people. We also have a dog named Buddy, a loyal companion who's been with us for 6 years. The space is cramped and desperately needs tidying. We took the boxes to the backyard, which has the largest area in the neighborhood but no fence. As the fire blazed, I felt relieved that the work was going smoothly. However, a moment later, Buddy began to run around, barking like crazy as if he was warning us about something. There was something in the driveway. I stood up and walked toward Buddy when suddenly a chill ran down my spine, as if someone was watching me. I turned around and saw a shadow standing in the driveway, just a few steps away from me. Its bulging eyes didn't blink, while its body was tall and gaunt, towering even over the nearby garage. A feeling of unease surged within me. It felt like a warning that this creature was not friendly. When I turned back to tell my mom, in an instant, the shadow had vanished. But I could still sense its presence lingering around. As I recounted the incident to my mom, she tried to find a rational explanation, but nothing could calm my nerves. I went up to my room, but the fear still clung to me. While I was in my room, I suddenly heard my mom scream, "Something is looking into the house." My heart stopped. Finally, my mom believed me. I grabbed a metal rod and went outside, despite the danger, a weapon to protect myself and my family. Buddy became frantic, howling intensely. The scene made me feel uneasy. I locked myself inside, calling my dad for comfort. Dad believes in the supernatural, but as I talked to him, things only got more chaotic. When things settled down, my mom rushed in and said something had broken the window from outside, but no one was there. Time passed, and the feeling of insecurity lingered in the air. My mom asked me not to tell my siblings, but I knew they needed to know the truth. When I told them, they clung to each other, their eyes filled with fear. For several nights, Buddy barked incessantly. A noise from outside kept me on edge. I decided I had to face this fear. I stepped outside with Buddy, feeling as if something was watching me from the shadows. As I stood there, once again, I saw that shadow. It wasn't alone. There were more shadows around, all taller than me. A feeling of helplessness welled up, but I couldn't abandon my family. I turned and ran inside, locking the door and keeping Buddy close. Despite trying to stay calm, I couldn't close my eyes. Confused thoughts about that strange presence kept replaying in my mind. When I woke up the next morning, my mom still tried to convince me that nothing happened, but I knew that darkness was still out there, waiting for a chance to return. Those nights are an unforgettable memory, and I can't stop thinking about what happened. I will never forget that gaze. Was this reality or just a nightmare? That question still hangs in my mind, and I hoped that I could find the answer. The strange encounter at Lake Tahoe. I want to share with you one of the strangest and most unforgettable experiences of my life, which happened when my friends and I decided to go camping at Lake Tahoe. The trip began like any other, filled with excitement, joy, and anticipation. But what happened at night completely changed my perspective on nature and the mysteries that lie hidden within it. We are a close-knit group of friends who dedicate at least one weekend each year to hiking and camping in remote, wild places. Just like previous trips, this one involved a 10-mile hike each way, with a total elevation gain of 7,000 feet, leading to a beautiful lake nestled deep in the mountains. Fall had arrived, and the weather was beginning to turn chilly. We were well prepared for nights where temperatures could drop to 0 degrees Celsius. This time, there were only 3 of us on the trip. Although I was the least prepared in the group, I felt confident I could handle it. After a long day of hiking, we finally reached the lake and set up camp. The scenery was serene, with the gentle breeze mingling with the vibrant hues of the sunset. We relaxed by the campfire, sipping whiskey to ward off the cold. At first, this trip seemed entirely normal, but sometimes those peaceful moments conceal something unseen, mysteries that we cannot foresee. As night fell, we each settled into our tents and hammocks. I was in a small tent, right next to my friend who was sleeping in a hammock near the fire pit, while the third friend camped about 100 feet away. At first, I thought I would easily fall asleep after such a tiring day, but for some reason I kept tossing and turning in my sleeping bag, feeling an inexplicable chill despite being warm. Suddenly, in the stillness of the night, I heard a frantic voice from outside. "Help me, help me." It was the voice of my closest friend, unmistakably urgent. My heart sank, and I froze, unable to move. Then the voice called out again, "Help me, I need to go to the bathroom," accompanied by familiar laughter. Sometimes, in the darkness of night, familiar sounds can bring an inexplicable sense of unease. Have you ever wondered if that voice isn't really your friend's? Then whose could it be? I replied irritably that he should just go, but then when I looked towards the hammock, I realized something terrible. My friend was still lying there, not having moved at all. I immediately felt a chill run down my spine, realizing that the voice I had heard earlier wasn't his. Something outside the tent was mimicking my friend's voice. Fear began to spread throughout my body. I tried to remain calm, not wanting to cause a panic, but the unease grew stronger. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rustling outside the tent continued, as if something was moving, weaving through the trees and rocks. Then suddenly, I felt my tent being gripped and pulled at an alarming speed. When faced with the inexplicable, the feeling of losing control becomes more intense than ever. In that moment, I wondered, had we unwittingly trespassed into the territory of something not of this world? I tried to scream, but everything suddenly vanished. When I opened my eyes, I was still lying in my spot in the tent. Nothing had changed. But I knew something had happened that night, something I couldn't fully comprehend. When morning came, I recounted the events to my friends, but they only laughed, thinking it was a dream. But deep down, I knew I had encountered something truly beyond human understanding. The wilderness always harbors secrets that we cannot explain. Sometimes, these strange phenomena are not merely dreams. They may serve as a reminder that we are just a small part of the vast universe, where many mysteries remain unexplored. And the question I have always asked myself since that night: what was it that mimicked my friend's voice? The Midnight Visit. Let me take you back in time to a night filled with mystery and tension that my family experienced when I was young. It all began in a very special place, Silver Creek Canyon, deep within the pine forests of Colorado. This area is renowned for its pristine beauty and eerie legends. This canyon not only attracts nature lovers, but also harbors many mysterious stories. In autumn, as the leaves change color, the scenery becomes even more enchanting. Yet, in those beautiful days, the shadows of the unknown linger somewhere nearby. It was one night in October 2011 when my parents, my little sister, and I decided to go camping in Silver Creek Canyon. I was as excited as a child because it was our first time camping overnight in the wilderness. After setting up the tent and lighting the campfire, we shared ghost stories and tales of the mysterious happenings in the forest. If you've ever been camping, you surely understand the thrill mixed with nervousness that comes when night falls. But that night brought us an unforgettable experience. As the campfire dwindled and the dim light faded, we gradually drifted off to sleep. However, in the middle of the night, I was awakened by the growling of our dog. It was an unusual sound that made my heart race. In nature, strange noises always evoke a sense of unease. Our dog was not just a pet, he was a guardian, a signal of anything out of the ordinary. The growling was frightening, not simply a response to spotting a rabbit. I felt as though someone was circling the campsite, drawing nearer to our tent. Eventually, my father decided to wake everyone up, pack our belongings, and leave immediately. The feeling of fear, not knowing who was standing outside the tent, was truly unsettling. That's why many people choose not to leave their safe zones at night. And so, in the darkness, we left Silver Creek Canyon, leaving behind unanswered questions. Who was out there in the dark? Perhaps we would never know. A terrifying experience. I'm going to tell you about an experience that I am sure I will never forget. It was a horrifying night in the old house where my mother grew up. When I decided to spend a week in this house, I imagined peaceful moments surrounded by nature, with lush trees, fresh air, and absolute tranquility. But I was unprepared for what awaited me. When I arrived, I couldn't help but feel excited. The wooden house, with its faded paint, old windows, and long porch, stood strong against the test of time. As I stepped inside, the scent of aged wood and a hint of mildew filled the air. But it was also the scent of memories. I spent the entire afternoon cleaning and rearranging everything, from my grandmother's pictures hanging on the walls to the dusty wooden chairs. As night fell, I decided to sit by the window, sipping tea while watching the sunset. The light faded, and I felt content in this peace. But as darkness enveloped the house, everything began to change. I lay in bed hoping to fall asleep when I heard footsteps outside in the yard. At first, I thought it could be wildlife, maybe a deer or a squirrel. But the sound repeated and it felt like something was watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine, sitting up with my heart racing, only to find no one outside. Do you understand what it feels like to be alone in the wilderness? It's unsettling. I began to feel anxious, struggling to believe the reality of the situation. I tried to calm myself, but it was impossible. Questions and doubts started to invade my mind. After a while, I decided to sleep to forget the reality. The silence lasted a long time. Then, a gentle knock echoed, waking me up. The true fear began. A question echoed in my head. Who could be knocking on the door in the middle of the night in such an isolated place? I gathered my courage and approached the window, peeking outside. The darkness was thick, only the tall trees swaying in the wind. There was no one there. I felt as if something invisible was lurking outside, trying to reach me. At that moment, skepticism turned to panic. I turned on the light and tried to reassure myself that I was just imagining things. But when the knock came again, this time louder and more urgent, I lost my composure. There's definitely no one outside, I told myself. The sound grew more resonant, as if someone was knocking to demand my attention. I couldn't believe what was happening, who or what was out there. My heart raced as if it wanted to leap out of my chest. I grabbed my phone, and in that moment I felt utterly alone, trapped between confusion and fear. By this time I couldn't take it anymore. The knocking ceased and I looked through the window. Outside was just a dark yard, and no one was there. But that didn't ease my discomfort. In my anxious fear, I gradually fell into a restless sleep. In my daze, I clearly heard whispers that came close and then faded away. I felt trapped in a nightmare with no way to wake up. When the night wore on, I lay under the covers, the weak light from the lamp casting shadows on the ceiling. The sounds didn't stop. They became increasingly distinct, as if something was drawing closer. "I can't believe this," I murmured into the darkness. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps, knocks on the door, and echoing whispers. Finally, the panic reached its peak. I couldn't close my eyes, couldn't breathe, and couldn't understand what was happening. I decided I wouldn't stay here another minute. When the first light of dawn shone through the window, I was ready to leave this house. Everything around me seemed to still, as if the noises had paused for a moment. As I stepped outside, the fear seemed to cling to me. I couldn't believe that one simple night could evoke such terrifying feelings. Even now, as I recall that night, I still can't explain what happened. What knocked on the door? Who left those sounds? These questions will never have answers. I left the old house, carrying with me the haunting memories that I will never forget. I wonder if I would dare to return to that place. Perhaps some secrets should remain in the shadows.